Good morning. This Friday, I'm Amarachi Ubani. You're welcome to our special coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Here are the headlines. Russian-held Zaporizhia. The Ukrainian president says the nuclear plant's disconnected from the power grid after nearby fires. Our reports also say that there has been a destruction of 8 Ukrainian warplanes. And the Russian President Vladimir Putin has ordered Russian military to boost manpower by 137,000 troops. Let's get right into it. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Europe was safe from a radiation accident on Thursday when the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant was disconnected from Ukraine's power grid. Thankfully, backup electricity kicked in and it was able to operate safely. There had already been fires which damaged overhead power lines, cutting the plant off. Concern is growing over fighting near the complex, which is the largest nuclear power plant in Europe.
Хочу запевнити усіх українців, ми робимо все, щоб не допустити аварійного сценарію.
The International Atomic Energy Agency and other international organizations must act much faster than now, because every minute of the Russian military staying at the nuclear plant is a risk of global radiation disaster. Diesel generators were immediately activated to provide energy to the station itself to support it after the shutdown. The world must understand what a threat this is. If the diesel generators had not turned on, if the automation and our station staff had not reacted after the blackout, then we would have already been forced to overcome the consequences of the radiation accident. Russia has put Ukraine and all Europeans in a situation one step away from a radiation disaster.
While the Russian Defense Ministry has confirmed its forces did indeed hit a military train at Chaplyne railway station in the Dnipropetrovsk region of Ukraine. At least 25 civilians were killed in that attack, which Kyiv says also hit residential areas. Russia has denied targeting civilians in the so-called special military operation. According to the Russian Defense Ministry, an Iskander missile had hit a military train at Chaplyne that was set to deliver arms to the front line in the eastern Donbas region. Russia also says it only destroyed 8 Ukrainian fighter jets in Poltava and in the Dnipropetrovsk region. Its attack there is considered one of the heaviest losses for Ukraine's Air Force in recent weeks. One of Ukraine's military allies in this war, U.S. President Joe Biden, has called on Russia to hand over control of Zaporizhia nuclear power plant to Ukrainian authorities. President Biden and Zelensky spoke on the phone on Thursday. Both leaders called for international officials to assess the plant's safety amid fears of a nuclear disaster, with Moscow and Kyiv accusing each other of shelling the site near front lines in the southern parts of Ukraine. Both Ukrainian and Russian officials have said personnel from the UN watchdog, the IAEA, can visit the plant soon. President Biden, in his conversation with Zelensky, reinforced U.S. support for Ukraine.
So the president reiterated the United States support for Ukraine as they defend themselves from Russian aggression, including yesterday's announcement of nearly $3 billion in weapons and equipment. He congratulated Ukraine as it marked a particularly significant Independence Day this week and shared his admiration for the people of Ukraine and its armed forces as they continue to inspire the world with their dedication and freedom. Again, we will have more of a more detailed readout to all of you as it relates to ZNPP. Look, a nuclear power plant, and I believe I said this yesterday, should never be an active war zone. And so we have said Russia should agree to demilitarize the zone around the plant and agree to allow an international Atomic Energy Agency visit as soon as possible to check on the safety and security of the systems. This is something that did come up in the conversation.
And more, the planned visits to the Zaporizhzhia power plants by the IAEA as Ukraine's energy minister, German Galushenko, said the nuclear inspectors could travel to the plants in the coming days. He says they should arrive from the Ukrainian territory and there can be no talks about any routes through the occupied Crimea or elsewhere, as the Zaporizhzhia plant is a Ukrainian plant occupied by Russian aggressors. Explaining further, Galushenko said any games with a nuclear plant would mean it has to be turned off from Ukraine's energy system, meaning a blackout of the plants, which has huge risks attached to it, a huge risk approaching that of a nuclear war, he says. Now, IAEA Chief Rafael Grossi says the UN nuclear watchdog is very close to being able to go to the nuclear power plant in Zaporizhzhia. He was making the comments on French TV on Thursday. Ukrainian staff is still operating the plant, but the site has been controlled by Russian forces since early in the 6-month war that began when Russia sent troops into Ukraine on February 24. Each side has accused the other of shelling the site, fueling international concern about the potential for a nuclear accident. The Leadership Council of Russia's State Duma, the lower house of parliament, issued a statement on Thursday saying it confirmed Moscow's readiness to facilitate an IAEA mission so the agency's specialists can testify on the spot that there are threats posed as a result of constant Ukrainian attacks on the nuclear power plant, which are fraught with tragic consequences for all mankind. The leaders of Russian parliamentary factions blame the United States and Britain of sponsoring terrorism by supplying Ukraine with weapons. They allege that this is being done deliberately to provoke a nuclear disaster in Europe. Meanwhile, Russia's emergency minister Alexander Kurenko says massive wildfires raging in the country's Ryazan region may have been caused by an arsonist bent on sabotage. Updating on the situation on Thursday, said, "We see certain elements of sabotage. There are elements of arson at the root of the wildfires," adding that Russian law enforcement will investigate whether foul play was actually involved. Ryazan region, which is located some 150 kilometers southeast of Moscow, has been hit by some of the worst wildfires experienced in recent years. The military reported this week that flames had engulfed almost 15,000 hectares of forests. The first blaze in the region was detected on August 7. In 10 days, the wildfires had spread so much that the smoke from them could be smelled in the capital. Firefighters tackling the disaster also dealing with hot weather and fast winds, which make their job more difficult. Russian law enforcement is currently on the alert for possible saboteurs seeking to damage the country on behalf of Ukraine. Speaking of which, Russian President Vladimir Putin has reportedly signed a decree increasing his country's armed forces by 137,000. It will increase the number of combat personnel in the armed forces by about 10%. That's 1.15 million. It will take the military's total headcount to 2.04 million. A decree also orders that the Russian government ensure funds are provided for the increase from the federal budget. A previous such order, signed by Putin in 2017, boosted the headcount to 1.9 million, of which 1.01 million were combat personnel. The decree comes just a day after Putin's defense chief acknowledged that the Russian military campaign in Ukraine has stalled, with experts saying the Kremlin's troops appeared demoralized and understaffed. Russian forces failed to capture the capital, Kyiv, but now control large parts of Ukraine's south and east, where Moscow has refocused most of its forces in the industrial Donbass region. Russian media is reporting Ukrainian rockets loaded with cluster bombs have damaged a chemical plant in the Donetsk People's Republic, causing an electrical fire. The Styrol factory halted operations, but there was no chemical release, and the fire was eventually put out, according to authorities. That attack happened on Thursday afternoon by 2 missiles from Ukrainian Uragan multiple launch rocket systems. The rockets were allegedly loaded with cluster munitions, which exploded and started a fire at the electrical substation inside the Styrol plant and on the roof of the nearby factory. Styrol director Vasily Agyov told local media the factory halted operations until the fire was extinguished. He also said about 40 cluster bombs were scattered inside the factory, but there was no risk of a chemical release. There were also no reports of casualties. Well, sliding back into Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky has welcomed the Italian Prime Minister Luigi Di Maio to the capital, Kyiv, during the meeting soon after on Thursday. President Zelensky said his country's relationship with Italy had helped it fight for its independence. He told Mr. Di Maio, within the past months, our countries developed relations of such a level which helped Ukraine to hold up in this fight for our independence. Italy became a leading country which supported Ukraine, our society and internally displaced people, meaning supported refugees with humanitarian aid. It also supported financially Ukraine's stability in the economy. We also feel the support by the Italian government to strengthen our army. Defence ministers of Norway, Finland and Sweden have announced enhanced operations in the North Calotte regions of Norway, Sweden and Finland, located north of the Arctic Circle. In a statement after their meeting in Loppi, a town some 70 kilometers from Helsinki, they said that since the security situation had deteriorated following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the countries needed to be ready to act together in peace, crisis and conflict. In addition to the question of defence cooperation, the ministers also discussed NATO membership. Norway is already a member of NATO, and Sweden and Finland have been invited to join the military alliance. The accession still needs to be ratified by the parliaments of all 30 North Atlantic Treaty Organization members before the countries can be protected by the NATO defence clause. It states that an attack on one member is an attack against all.
I hope that we can be members of NATO as soon as possible. As longer as we wait, it's a waste of time. We must start immediately with the military planning, with what we can do together, how we can combine the resources in our countries.
Joining me now is Professor Denis Soltis of the Department of Public Administration and International Development at Kimep University, Almaty, Kazakhstan. Professor Soltis, thank you for joining me this morning.
Nice to be with you. Nice to see you. You hear me and see me?
I can see you. Can you see me?
Can you hear me? Yes.
Everything's fine. I can hear you as well. Thank you for being so kind. Now, I want to begin with concerns over the Zaporizhzhia power plants. The Ukrainian president did say a disaster was averted on Thursday. One of the reactors, he said, was turned off. Thanks to backup electricity, Ukraine is still standing, and the power situation has stabilized. Does this information, however, make you more aware how catastrophic this war in Ukraine could become?
Well, I know very little about nuclear energy, but I think it's quite clever of the Kremlin regime. Well, first of all, yes, they have physical control of the plant, and now they're starting to appear reasonable and generous by allowing EIA inspectors to come and inspect the plant. Why not? They ensure the safety of the plant, which will now be hooked up to the Russian grid. So as long as the Russians are in control of that area, they want the plant to operate for themselves, either to send the electricity to Crimea, which is starting to look doubtful, I think, but it could go further eastwards, the electricity to Russia. So Russia has every advantage to keep the plant running, and even diplomatically appears reasonable by allowing inspectors. So Russia doesn't lose anything. In fact, it gains a lot, and it denies the plant to the Ukrainians. So it's sort of win-win for the Russian side here. But my guess is that for the moment, the plant is safe. If the Russians should start to lose territory around the plant, this is speaking kind of hypothetically, if the Ukrainian forces started to retake that area, well, then the issue would come up again.
Indeed, it could come up again. And I'm just wondering, how does Kazakhstan get energy from Russia? Are you affected in any way by what's currently going on between Russia and Ukraine?
Yes, they get import oil, finished gasoline, for one thing. Kazakhstan exports oil to Russia, and then Russia sends back refined gasoline and oil products, lubricants. So Kazakhstan is, to quite a large extent, dependent on the Russian market. Although trade between the two countries has been falling off recently because, well, there's caution now in Kazakhstan about Russia's larger, geopolitical intentions.
Yeah, and back to the Zaporizhzhia plant, we're hearing both Ukraine and Russian authorities giving the go-ahead to the IAEA inspectors, which is pretty kind of Russia for them to visit the nuclear plant to inspect it. But Ukraine is given conditions, and that's these inspectors must pass through Ukrainian territory. Knowing that these inspectors are walking a fine line between diplomacy and doing their job, how difficult a position do you think they are in to do this?
Well, I'm lost here. I don't understand this issue of whether they should come from Russia or from Ukraine. I don't know what difference this makes. And sure, they could, as far as I can tell, they can inspect the plant. They can say, well, probably things are safe. And I think that's what Russia would want. I would just repeat what I said. Russia doesn't lose anything with this. It would be nice if the International Atomic Energy Agency gave them, a clean bill of health for the operation of this plant for Russia. So chances are this will, the inspection will go ahead. I don't see what difference it makes, or whether it makes much difference, whether they visit from Russia or from Ukraine. Maybe Russia would put pressure on them somehow. I don't know.
Let's talk about the attacks from Wednesday into Thursday, on Ukraine. Wednesday was Ukraine's Independence Day. They'd expected a barrage of rockets and missile attacks from Russia. Russian government says it's reducing its assaults to curb civilian casualties. How humane do you think that either side can be during this war?
Sorry, what was your last question?
How humane you think both sides can be during the war, with Russia saying it's curbing its assault on Ukraine because of civilian casualties?
Well, that's total nonsense. They're trying to inflict as many casualties and as much physical damage as they can. This is obvious from, the areas that they occupy. If they're not inflicting casualties, it means that they're just militarily too weak to do so. Of course, propaganda, the narrative is, totally disconnected from what's happening on the ground. Now, I could talk, if you would like, a little bit about the military situation, because I think it sets sort of the climate for the larger politics, including the Zaporizhzhia plant. So, with your leave, then, what I would say here is that as I just said, it's military issues that seem to be a condition that seems to be driving the politics. And the most significant thing that has happened over the last month or two is that the Russian army is weakening. They can't find enough, they can barely recover their losses with new recruits, while the Ukrainian army is gaining in strength, but slowly, because it depends on Western weapons coming in, and the Ukrainians have to be trained on these, and both processes are slow. The Ukrainians have stopped the Russians in the east, in the Donbass, at a high cost to the Russians, and now are not in a counteroffensive, but in sort of a pre-counteroffensive phase further south in the Kherson region. Now, what's interesting here is that the Ukrainians have trapped a large Russian contingent of 20,000, perhaps more, troops on the western side of the Dnieper River. And soon, in about a couple of weeks, one military expert said they will be running out of food and ammunition and fuel. It's, unless Russia has some tricks up their sleeves, that large contingent will be lost to the Russian army. They'll have to either stand and fight and die, or more likely they'll have to surrender, or some will try to flee on foot as they abandon their heavy equipment. So that sets the stage for Russia's renewed urgency for a diplomatic offensive. And so this is why our diplomatic efforts in an attempt to isolate Ukraine and reduce Western support for weapons. So this was, I think, what was behind the initial threat to shut off gas to the European countries, and then also this was part of the the actual, not threat, but the actual policy of blocking the Black Sea so that food exports couldn't go to the Middle East and North African countries. And then the Zaporizhia nuclear plant is an issue here. Well, so the cutting off the gas and the food were, overt blackmail and didn't have the desired effect, because the European countries are scrambling to find alternative sources of gas, and also the world community, international community, is trying to find alternative ways of getting grain to the Middle East and North Africa. And it's fortunate here that it's the harvest season that's in full swing in wheat exporting countries like the United States, Canada, and Australia. So hopefully, the food shortage will be addressed. Against this background of the apparent failure of blackmail, the Russians now are trying, the Kremlin, this gambit here with the Zaporizhia power plant. As I said, it first of all denies the electricity to the Ukrainians. It gives the electricity to the Russian side, allowing inspectors to give the green light, or to verify the safety of the plant is a good move, a smart move on the Russian side. It makes them look reasonable. And so now they've softened their position on the gas, and now they've allowed the grain to be exported, and now they're allowing the inspectors for the plant. So it's starting to make, so it's part of a diplomatic now offensive, I think. What Russia's trying to do is to build an international coalition that will put pressure, that is supposed to put pressure on Ukraine to come to the negotiating table, and also put pressure on the international community of Western countries to reduce or stop exports of weapons. So I think that's how we should understand what's going on here.
Well, Professor Denis Soltis, I guess we'll have to leave it here. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. I wish you a lovely day ahead.
Well, okay. Well, it was my pleasure. Be healthy and take care of yourself.
You too. Coming up after the break, Citigroup to shut Russia consumer and commercial banking businesses. We'll have that in a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has assured German citizens the government will take measures against high inflation during a citizens' dialogue in Magdeburg in eastern Germany. He said this on Thursday as he answered questions by randomly chosen German citizens about topics such as Ukraine, the gas crisis, and inflation. Fielding a question about the ongoing war in Ukraine, Mr. Scholz said that the goal was that Russia wouldn't win, but warned of a generalization of all Russians. Scholz is meeting citizens in various German cities to answer their questions. Protesters were demonstrating against the German government's actions in the gas crisis with the high inflation. Inflation in Germany in July was 7.5%, with the German Federal Bank expecting a potential inflation rate of 10% in fall. Russian opposition politician Yevgeny Roisman has been banned by a court from attending public events or even using the internet for about 5 weeks, after he was charged with discrediting the armed forces. That offense, newly introduced after Russia's February 24 invasion, carries a prison sentence of up to 5 years. Roisman's case centers on a Q&A session held on YouTube. A court declined prosecutors' request to place him under house arrest and ordered him to be released from detention. Roisman denies all the charges. Meanwhile, the Wall Street Journal says the U.S. government intends to officially name its military mission to aid Kyiv and appoint a general to command it, citing Biden administration officials. This would formalize the operation that predates the escalation of hostilities in Ukraine and allow the Pentagon to award ribbons, medals, and special pay to its participants. Given the operation a name is significantly bureaucratically, the journal explained, as it typically entails long-term dedicated funding and the possibility of special pay, ribbons, and awards for service members participating in the effort. The U.S. has previously named its operations in Afghanistan and Iraq. The original intervention in Afghanistan was dubbed Enduring Freedom, replaced by the nation-building Freedom Sentinel in 2015. The 2003 invasion of Iraq was called Iraqi Freedom, while the 2014 redeployment to Iraq and Syria to fight Islamic State, formerly ISIS, terrorists was designated Inherent Resolve. A 2-star or 3-star general will be appointed to command the effort, in what the journal described as a shift from the largely ad hoc effort to provide training and assistance to the Ukrainians for years. While the U.S. has sent Ukraine almost $11 billion worth of weapons and ammunition since February, Washington and NATO allies have provided Kyiv military aid since 2014 and put a U.S.-backed government in power and set off the civil war in Donbass. Joining me now is Chief Economist at PricewaterhouseCoopers, Andrew Nevin. He joins me from Abuja. Andrew, thank you for joining me this morning.
Good morning. It's great to be here.
I just want to ask a few questions, on the economic impact of these sanctions, especially on Russia. At this point, do you think they're really being impacted by the sanctions imposed by NATO allies and by the U.S. and other countries?
Well, I think obviously gas prices have gone up, oil prices remain highly elevated. So in one sense, they're doing well economically on that. But remember, the purpose of the sanctions is, in one sense, to try to hurt the other country economically. But the other reason to do the sanctions is you don't want to do business with people that are war criminals. So I think that the debate isn't necessarily about the damage it inflicts economically, but about it's important for the West to stay united and not really deal with Russia, given what they've done to the Ukraine and the horrendous stories that are coming out that are war crimes.
Yeah, and more African countries are expressing interest in joining BRICS. Will this be good for the continent's relationship with the West?
Well, I think, in some sense, I've said before, in my own personal view, is that this is not Africa's fight, in a sense. And Africa and Nigeria in particular should have as good relations as it can around the world economically and socially. So that means with China, which of course has been a problem on the continent, but with India, with Russia, with the West and the US and Europe and Canada, of course. Does it create a problem? I don't think there's an expectation on the West. Obviously, they want to be close to Africa, and the U.S. in particular, Nigeria has really been making efforts in the last few months. In Nigeria and Africa, there's a new U.S.-Africa strategy that's come out recently. Anthony Blinken, the secretary, came to Africa and visited a number of countries, including South Africa and Rwanda. So there is, in a sense, a charm offensive going on. But I think from Africa's perspective, I think that Africa should have good relations around the world. As I said, the Ukraine-Russia West conflict right now is not really Africa's problem.
It's not Africa's problem, but then how should Africa relate to Russia and to countries like the U.S., which are threatening, sanctions on countries that still do business with Russia?
Yeah, well, the U.S., of course, tries to extend its reach around the world with these sanctions. I don't think it's going to be particularly effective if they multiply out. India, we'll take India as an example here. India actually, for historical reasons, is very close to Russia. And it's very difficult for India to disengage from it. And yet India and the United States are allies. And there's a huge business and social ties between India and the United States. So, we've seen this before with things like FATCA, where the United States tries to extend its reach across the world. I think we should resist it. Not that we want to be on good terms with the United States, but we can't have the United States dictate terms to Africa, the relationships we have around the world. On the other hand, in this particular conflict, as I said, Africa should make its choice, but it should consider carefully what in fact the Putin regime has done in the Ukraine and how friendly it wants to be with Russia. I guess the question I have about Russia is what efforts have they made to develop Africa? I mean, the media reports, most of the efforts are around destabilizing, particularly the Sahel region and the mercenaries from Russia. So it's not clear Africa needs to do what's in Africa's best interest. It's not clear that Russia offers really much to Africa. But to the extent that they do, I think we should embrace it.
Yeah, and these countries that are interested in joining the BRICS, for example, Nigeria, what would be the benefits of that?
Well, I think the BRICS is interesting. I mean, I think there was a lot of obviously fanfare when the BRICS was formed, but it's not quite clear what it's achieved at this stage. And of course, all of the BRIC countries are in different positions. Now, we've seen from a political viewpoint, China and Russia, because of the conflict and because of China's conflict with the West, become closer and closer. And we expect that to continue while the two presidents remain in power. It's not sure. It's not clear within that construct what's the advantage to Brazil, which is really more aligned, obviously, with the Americas and with Europe, in fact. Or what's in it for India, who clearly can't be aligned with China, don't want to align too closely with China. They have military conflict with China in the Himalayas, for example, regularly on that. So I'm not sure the BRICS construct is really working particularly well after more than a decade. So I'm not sure that Nigeria's interests are really served in trying to join that construct. And of course, in BRICS, the S stands for South Africa, and South Africa kind of stands outside of all of the issues that I've just mentioned with the other four BRIC countries. So I'm not sure there's really much benefit for us trying to join the BRIC countries. I mean, one thing that we have argued is a specific country that we should be having closer ties to is India. I mean, there's a lot of similarities in the challenges that we face and that India's faced over the last few decades. They've made a lot of progress in addressing them using technology, state-led development, engaging the diaspora, just three of them, for example. And we just put out a paper, PwC put out a paper on deepening Nigeria-India ties. But the BRICS construct itself, I'm not sure there's a huge advantage to Nigeria using its diplomatic capital to try to join BRICS.
Finally, Andrew, the war also is affecting relations with OPEC+. We're not really seeing countries pulling their weight, especially in Africa. For oil-producing countries in Africa, not really seeing much of them pulling their weight, to fill in the vacuum, of the lack of oil coming from, that part of Europe as a result of the war.
Well, I mean, the country that's really not pulling its weight, unfortunately, is Nigeria at the end of the day. I mean, the production numbers, the last production numbers for July, if I have this correctly, were below 1.1 million barrels a day, so 1.0 something, which is just a disaster for us. I mean, you look at the pressure on the Forex, you see what's happening in the aviation industry, international aviation industry into Nigeria, for example. You look, Manufacturers Association of Nigeria came out yesterday talking about the FX scarcity. We all know what's going on in the parallel market, but the primary reason for this is because our low production levels that we all understand. So the country that's doing the least to really alleviate the pressure on oil in the world is us. And of course, if we produce 2 million barrels a day and the price moderated because we were helping to fill the supply gap, I think we'd still be massively ahead if it was $80, but we produce 2 million barrels a day. But the FX crisis that we have in this country, the primary cause of it right now, I mean, it's amazing to me that we're sitting here having this conversation at $100 oil. And we're saying how much Nigeria is suffering. I mean, all the years I've been here, 13 years, if we had $100 oil, we would be doing extremely well economically, and we'd have a surplus of dollars. We'd have a stable exchange rate as we did at 160 for many years. But we're not in that situation. And the OPEC gap, the biggest OPEC gap, is Nigeria's low production.
Couldn't agree more. Andrew Nevin, thank you so much for speaking with me this morning.
You're welcome.
More from the world of business now. Citi Group Incorporated says it will close its consumer and commercial banking businesses in Russia starting this quarter. The closure will affect about 2,300 of Citi's 3,000 employees in Russia across 15 branches. It will cost an estimated $170 million, mainly over the next 18 months. Citigroup, the U.S. bank with the largest presence in Russia, announced plans in 2021 to leave the retail business as part of a broader departure from some overseas markets. It expanded the scope of its exit in March to include a local commercial banking after Russia sent its troops into Ukraine. Europe's energy costs skyrocket. Russia is burning off large amounts of natural gas, all according to analysis shared by the BBC News. Experts are saying the gas would previously have been exported to Germany. They say the plant near the border with Finland is burning an estimated $10 million worth of gas every day. Scientists are concerned about the large volumes of carbon dioxide and soot it is creating, which could exacerbate the melting of the Arctic ice. The analysis by Rystad Energy indicates that around 4.34 million cubic meters of gas are being burned by the flare every day. It's coming from a new liquefied natural gas plant in Portovaya, northwest of St. Petersburg. The first signs that something was awry came from Finnish citizens over the nearby border who spotted a large flame on the horizon early this summer. We'll talk now to our business correspondent, John Mekwa, and Russia is expecting to revive local bond sales after a 6-month freeze. What's that about?
Yeah, well, immediately the war started, the stock market was closed for a bit, and especially even up till now, it's closed to non-Russian residents. So that means if you have shares, if you bought shares in the Moscow exchange, you cannot trade it, you cannot sell it, because what happened, of course, was that with all of the sanctions and all of the bad sentiments that came with the war, a lot of people just wanted to dump, you know, to sell whatever they had and get whatever money they could, even though they knew that you may not be able to get the capital that you invested, you know. So Russia had to take some steps. So one of it was that they shut down the Moscow exchange for a bit, and also they shut down the bonds, you know, which they do. So, you know, bonds are when country tries to raise money, so they have others, especially people from outside the country, buy like shares into the country, and then after a bit, they give them yields, interest, based on the interest rate and stuff like that. So they had shut down the bonds market, so that means you couldn't buy or sell Russian bonds since the war started for 6 months now. So they're thinking that by September, by next week, they could resume it, but there are also some changes that come with that. You know, we've been talking about how we have payment arrangements between Russia and India with the rupee or the rubles, and then with the yuan. So, and most of the bonds are basically in dollars, you know. So now they are planning that they're going to resume with the yuan. So they're going to have the Chinese currency traded, used to buy or sell bonds. And then they're also going to have the one with rubles. So even though they're opening, I'm sure they will also announce some other restrictions that people cannot release, because if not, a lot of people would just want to dump. And when a lot of people want to sell, then the price crashes, and that affects the value or the rating given to a country.
So of what benefit is that for those who have already sold their bonds? I mean, are they bereft of any economic or business advantage?
Yeah, well, if people who were able to sell their bonds before now were able to at least recoup, because it's an investment. So I decide to buy the bonds of about $1 million, for instance, and it's a 5-year bond. So that means at the end of every year, I'm supposed to get some interest rate, some profits from that. And then at the end of the 5 years, then I'm going to get, you know, my capital and some other money. You understand? So if I was able to sell before then, I may not be able to get as much as I should have gotten at the end of 5 years, but at least I'm able to get my capital. So that's what they get, you know, at the end of the day. And so now that they want to open it, I'm sure they're going to bring up some restrictions. If not, a lot of people from unfriendly countries would just want to dump, you know, and sell, oh, let me at least, even if I can't get the yields or I can't get the interest, let me just get my capital and leave, you know, the unfriendly market.
Well, not just unfriendly people from unfriendly countries. You have Russians from outside also wanting to buy. Remember, we talked about a lot of them holidaying, in many other European countries trying to escape, the sanctions in Russia.
And when we talked about that, some people say, so when they talked about the visa restriction, some people are saying, oh, let's give them, because in Russia, according to what we hear, I know you would know more about, you talk to people in Russia, they say they feed them with the wrong news, that Russia is a victim in all of this. So let's let them go out of Russia and get the real picture and know actually what President Putin is doing and what's going on out there. So, I mean...
Well, information is limited in Russia regarding what Russia exactly is doing in Ukraine, I can tell you that. But Belarus and Russia finished all the necessary steps in order to switch the main payments between the two countries to Russian rubles.
Yes.
Does that mean they're also taking on the currency?
Yeah. So they're going to do the Chinese currency, the one, and then they also will start with the rubles. They say they're going to start in little bits. But, what they're trying to do here is remove focus from the dollar. So everything, because, the sanctions will basically disturb them because of the dollar. And they've been talking about how an alternative to switch, an alternative to the dollar. We have... Yeah, and then we have BRICS also as an alternative.
Yeah, but they are a small country.
Yeah,
how exactly can they be so dependent on Russia?
Are you talking of China?
No, Belarus.
Oh, Belarus. No. Oh, Belarus. Belarus is, in fact, I wanted to say that it looks like Belarus will soon be consumed by Russia.
But they're almost, they act like they're annexation of Russia.
Yes, because, okay, so I have some numbers here. So as many as 2,240 enterprises with Russian capital operate in Belarus. Right, that's Russian, controlled by Russia. So that tells you the amount of economy of Belarus that is being controlled by Russia. On the other hand, you have 113 entities of the Russian Federation is home to 130. So there are 113 entities that are supposed to belong to Belarus that are operating in Russia. So that tells you that I don't know if Belarus can actually operate or survive without Russia. They've been giving them Russia has been giving them a lot of aid recently, especially with the war, and now they're agreeing to do rubles payments, So what's going to happen to Belarus? I think they also have a ruble too, but they call it Belarus ruble. What's going to happen to them?
It almost sounds like an extension of an annexation of Russia.
Yes, so
the president is very
I hope they don't
sympathetic.
cry for their independence tomorrow.
That sounds a bit harsh. Ukraine's economy, however, is expected to stabilize over the coming year, but they have so much rehabilitation to do, so much reconstruction. How feasible is that? The economy will bounce back.
But I guess they're just keeping hope alive. So last week, we talked about how President Zelensky is privatizing part of the economy. So normally what used to happen in Russia is that I think about 30 or 50% of the banking sector is controlled by the government. Then the issue of arable land, we know they are big on agriculture.
Yeah.
They couldn't sell arable land to the private sector. So President Zelensky is trying to change that. And from next month also, they're going to start privatizing and selling some of those land, or they're going to put a limit to it because people are complaining that they want to sell things of the country. And also, it might lead to unemployment because, for instance, the banks, it employs a lot of people. So once you get the private sector involved, then private sector will want to limit how much they're paying for salaries. So they're most likely going to, send some people home and all of that. But I guess what President Zelensky is trying to do is look beyond the war. The government cannot really handle the burden anymore.
It has to depend on the private sector.
Exactly, So they're talking of privatizing, and they also have a new program. They call it Advantage Ukraine, and it's meant to attract investment into Ukraine at this time. I guess that'll be more of PT investment because a lot of people don't want to risk their capital, at a time like this.
Well, maybe in a few years' time, when this war is over, they might consider reinvesting. But for now, any money is going in there is going into rehabilitation and reconstruction. Thanks a lot, Ini, for explaining all of that to us. Look forward to your show at 10 o'clock.
Thank you so much, Amaracha.
When we come back after the break, Ukrainian children now living in the U.S. prepare for a new school year. Stay with us. Welcome back to the last lap of the program. We get up close and personal now with Irina Palamachuk, whose property was bombed by Russian forces in early March this year. Irina's family house and the home she built herself in 2020 were brought to the ground. She has not been able to get over it 5 months after. Irina says she's not angry or resentful. Can hardly describe how she feels about what has happened. Although she was born to a Russian mother, she says she feels no emotional attachment to the Russians. She said she felt surprisingly happy after her daughter donated to a crowdfunding group that allows donors to have personalized messages written on artillery shells used by Ukrainian army. Palamachuk family is among thousands of people who donated to the local crowdfunding website that raises money for Ukrainian army by selling personalized messages on the shells. Support for such crowdfunding groups has recently grown, particularly among Ukrainians who are mourning for their loss. The group has so far collected $67,420 for the Ukrainian army by offering the chance to deliver a message on bombs and missiles before they're fired. When asked whether this was an appropriate way to crowdfund for weapons, Revenge for creator Alexander Erhardt said that they were not raising money for crime. Whoever considers it unfair, he says, could just donate. There are at least 2 other crowdfunding groups campaigning to support the Ukrainian army, offering donors to write private messages on artillery items. In sports news now, Russian figure skater Maria Dmitrieva has submitted an application with the Figure Skating Federation of Russia, asking to be allowed to receive Israeli sports citizenship. The 14-year-old Dmitrieva was previously trained in the school of Alexei Mishin. Skating last season, she finished 7th at the Russian Figure Skating Juniors Cup at the city of Yoshkar-Ola. The International Skating Union has extended the suspension on all athletes from Russia and Belarus. The suspension was reinforced in regard to figure skating, speed skating, and short track speed skating competitions. A former NBA champion Denis will not be going to Russia to try to help free WNBA star Brittany Griner, who was sentenced to 9 years in prison for illicit drug smuggling. Last week, Rodman had announced that he was going to Russia to free the player. But following a stern warning from U.S. State Department, Rodman admitted he will not be taking the trip. And as we end the program, Thursday marked the first day of the 2022-2023 school year for students at St. Nicholas Cathedral School in Chicago, Illinois. Administrators say this year will be unlike any other at St. Nick's. The school welcomed 65 children who fled war-torn Ukraine with their families months ago and found shelter in Chicago. Students, staff and parents started the new school year off on a positive note with a special prayer. About 50 of the new Ukrainian students spent the summer learning English intensively to prepare as best as possible for the new academic year. Principal Cyrili says thanks to an outpouring of community support and donations, St. Nick's School has been able to hire staff to help address language barriers with the new students. Emotional support lesson plans are also being prepared to help refugee children deal with the trauma of being displaced and the ongoing Russian invasion happening in their homeland.
This year, we have 65 students from Ukraine, and those students need support. Imagine coming from another country and you don't have those resources, and the fear of, like, you don't speak the language. So that did fall on us. Those pressures fall on us. They just wanted some sort of, like, some sort of comfort, right? And knowing that everything would be okay. Which for a lot of our families, you know, things aren't okay.
I heard about this school in church, and when I came the first time, a principal of this school, Miss Cyrili, was so kind and smile, and I understand, oh, those people fit to us because they are sincerely welcoming us.
I like the teachers, I like the cafeteria, I like lots of things here. I had to come here because there were no school, there were lots of air alarms, and it's uncomfortable.
Children can't study at school because when alarm starts, we have to go to basement and to hide. So it was a normal life. It was hard every time to hear it and to hide, and you can do nothing with it.
I think it'll fit in just fine. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.